Woo, 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 woo. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Have I Told You the One About? Today, we're doing fabulous faints. I'm a fainter. So I'm just going to tell you about some of the exciting things that have happened while I have fainted. But first, I wanted to say that this weekend, I have decided that Have I Told You the One About is going to have special guests. I'm going to have two special guests on Saturday and Sunday. I have been working so hard to try to figure out what the HE double toothpicks how I could work the technology. I've been learning things and studying and doing all kinds of stuff, and it is complicated. There are a lot of things to know for an old person, but I'm going to figure it out come hell or high water, and I've given myself a deadline. Saturday and Sunday, I'm going to have special guests. So, yeah, I don't think I'll tell you who they are because I don't know who they are. So I'll be making some phone calls. Okay, here we go. Fabulous faints. I have fainted a million times in my life. I'm very tall and I have super low blood pressure. I can eat all the salt that I want. And so I fainted many a time. The first time I remember fainting was when the Rudolph and Lamar and Christine, who started high school with me and were Baptists, started elementary school. They came in grade 6, I think, to my school. They were Baptists and they lived in the neighborhood. And I was at that age, like you're 11 years old and you're sort of unsure about the world, but you want to believe in something. And so you sort of find Jesus for a brief little minute. You're like, maybe I'm going to be a priest when I grow up or a homosexual. I just can't tell. I don't know which one would be more fun. And so I was getting a little churchy, and they were Baptists, and they were really sweet, and they lived up the road from Michael Payne, one of my best friends. And so I would go hang out with Michael, and these kids who were in my school lived 5 doors down, and we'd all hang out at the park together. And one time, Lamar jumped off of the overhead monkey bars or whatever and landed on my head and knocked me out. But that's not the time I'm actually talking about. They invited me to go to a Sunday service. And the parents, it was not in a church. I think it was in in a community center, and we were in the basement. And so the parents went and did something somewhere. They had a service somewhere, and the kids did a kind of catechism, but it was Baptist catechism. So I don't know what that was. Some kind of Baptist Christian educational learn about Jesus thing. And then at the end, people all came together and they would sing songs. But this week they had the deacon. So there was a fancy guy from out of town who was coming to see is there a deacon? Well, I remember it being a deacon, but it was 40 years ago. So if you're Baptist and don't hate me. But he was a fancy person. And he came from out of town and he was there. And so he was there for when we were doing the singing. And I was, a high-strung kid on the best of days. But now I was at a church thing for the first time ever with Baptists who are quite Baptist. And I was just feeling kind of overwhelmed by the whole experience. And then we started singing and I got really lightheaded. And I said to Rudy, uh-oh. And I sat down and Rudy leaned over and he said, Michael, you're not supposed to sit. And I went to get up again and I just keeled over and hit the floor. And I came to and there were feet all the way around me. And there were 15 people doing a laying on of hands. Everybody in that room came over and laid their hands on me and were like praying the devil out of me. Get this evil spirit out of his body, Lord Jesus. Save this man, this boy. Don't you take him. You get out, demon. Get out of his body. 15 people yelling like that over me when I come to, and you're a little disoriented and you're 11 years old. And I remember the priest who had done the service earlier, he came in and came between the legs and grabbed me and pulled me out from between them and took me to the bathroom. And I had blood on my chin and I had a little cut on my forehead and I had a big bump on my forehead eventually. And he cleaned me up a little bit and they sent me home. And I never went to church again. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is probably when I realized I was homosexual. Right? It was a clear sign. The devil had me, and I was going somewhere else. I did not go back to Baptist school. So that was the first time I ever remember passing out. Whenever I moved to Kelowna 13 years ago, I moved in with a mutual friend, and she had a suite in the basement. So this guy had moved in, and he'd been in the basement for like, I don't know how long, months really. And he had this brother who would come visit. And coincidentally, the brother was somebody I recognized from my Vancouver life. So I'd only been living there for about a year. And suddenly the brother of this guy that I knew, and the guy was gay and he was quite handsome. And my friend told me that he was really good and bad. He had a really great penis. His brother would come visit, and so I was like, oh, I know your brother, that's so funny. And we would do it through text. I never actually met him face to face. We would just do it through text, and that went on for like 6 weeks or something. He had moved in and I'd seen the brother, but I hadn't seen him, and we never formally met. And the house had a suite in the basement, but it was connected through just a little door. So finally one day he was home and I was home, and I wrote him and I said, hey, you're home and so am I, we should finally meet. So he said, okay, I'm going to come upstairs. So he came up and he pops out into the kitchen, and we're sitting around gabbing. And I said, oh, it's so funny. I saw your brother leave here the other day. And so I know him from my Vancouver life. And he was like, oh yeah, he's not doing so great. He just had surgery. And I was like, what do you mean he's had surgery? He was like, oh yeah, he had this thing done with his spine. And he was telling me what the surgery was. He wasn't telling me in gruesome detail. He was just telling me like where the problem was in his spine and what they had to do with it. But I have this very graphic imagination, right? This is how I make my bread and butter, is dreaming things up. And so in my head, I have a little TV screen, and my face is like right inside the surgery. His back is opened up and there's all the blood and they're moving bones around. And I looked at him and I was like, okay, I got to go sit down. And I turned the corner from the little hallway where we were in the sort of the kitchen area to go down the hall. And he heard this thump. And so he just sort of leaned over and looked, and he said he saw me bounce off the fridge and land on the floor. I passed out from a description of a surgery, because I'm that kind of faggot. Not the most dramatic. The paramedics came and they took me to the hospital, and I was fine. I also passed out at a show once in Vancouver. I was seeing a show, and I never told my friends this. So if they're watching, this is the first time I'm ever admitting it. But I went to a rock concert and I really needed to fart, and I was in a very crowded space. And instead of just going to the bathroom like a normal person, I didn't go to the bathroom in public for a very long time. I was quite neurotic about it. Instead of going to the bathroom like a normal person and just, letting it rip or stepping outside, I just thought I'd hold it. I just cinch. Like, I'm a faggot. I'm really good at going whenever I need to, right? And I got overwhelmed with fart and I passed out. I went outside eventually and I fainted. And I fainted in the downtown east side, and somebody came out of an alley and came over and was looking to help me, which was very sweet. And the bouncers saw that a street person was helping me and thought, we better get this guy inside, because who knows what's going on with him. Because they saw that I'd come out of the show. They recognized me. And they bring me into the back room, and I'm feeling super groggy. They say, who are your friends? And I was like, oh, they're wearing this and that, and they're standing in this part of the room, and their names are this. So they went and they found my friends by magic, because I pay attention to clothes. And my friends came back, and I just felt like shit because I had passed out. I couldn't tell them that I passed out because I was holding in a fart. Don't hold in a fart. And I decided that I should just sit tight and not do anything. And they said, do you want to go to the hospital? And I was like, I don't know. And they're like, well, we called the paramedics. And I was like, okay, I don't really think I need to go to the hospital, but I don't know. I'm so disoriented. I was so confused. And they were like, how many beer did you have? And I'm like, I only had one beer. Did somebody put something in your beer? I was like, I don't know. Did you put your beer down somewhere? I was like, I don't know. And when you call the paramedics on the downtown east side, it turns out they're not always the first people to show up. I had 6 firemen show up. 6 firemen in their gear come walking into the back room, and they're all standing around asking me questions. Handsome, 40-year-old, salt and pepper, scruffy beard, fireman out at 11 o'clock at night, seeing if I'm okay. It was really great, except I still needed to fart some. I don't know what I'd eaten, but I still needed to fart. And I had all these handsome guys around. So, anyways, they took me to the hospital and they gave me an EKG monitor, something that goes beep, 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 as your heart beats for an overnight. And I was fine and they never found anything. And I never told anybody it was because I had to fart because I'm a terrible person and I probably wasted a lot of money in the hospital. Thank God it didn't happen during the pandemic. I promise you, if I get taken to the hospital, I'm going to tell them that I need to fart, at least during the pandemic, and who knows afterwards. So, once I also passed out on a flight from, I'm not a very good flyer. I'm quite a nervous flyer. So I was flying from Toronto to Vancouver and I fainted. I had been staying, I had a little cold. I stayed up really late. I made a movie all day with my friend. We made this funny little scat movie, which was about shitting on the toilet, scat, but it was me scat singing in drag, shitting on the toilet. So it was like scat and scat. And the movie was called Scat. And it was really cute. I looked like a little pink princess. I had a little tiara. I was adorable. Anyways, we made this movie. It took all day. And so we wanted to party at night because it was my last night in town and I wanted to see my friends. So I went out on the town with them and I stayed out really late and I had a really early flight. So I only had 3 hours sleep. So I had a cold. I had 3 hours sleep. I didn't have breakfast because I didn't want to be late for my plane. And I got there just on time and I get on the plane and I think, oh, I'm just going to buy some food on the plane. But this was that stupid time about 15 years ago where the airlines decided that you had to pay money for food. But there was a weird transition period where I think they weren't serving food and they didn't have any sandwiches because we were doing a stopover, I think. Yeah, so it was a short 2.5 hour flight because I had a stopover somewhere halfway. So they didn't have any food on board at all because they were in this transition period. They only had cookies, and it was the morning, and so I had some cookies, and it probably made my insulin go, my blood sugar, and then I crashed and I passed out completely on the plane. And I told the stewardess that I'd passed out, and she didn't do anything. And I was like, could you try to find me some food? Like, could you ask if somebody else has some food because I'm starving and cookies won't do it? And I just passed out because I have a cold and I'm feeling like shit. And she didn't make an announcement. She just said, there is no food on board. I was too young. I should have reported her. I should have been like, well, look, that was serious. I fainted and I told somebody and they did nothing about it. Anyways, the second time I fainted on a plane ride from Toronto to Kelowna, so I had a stopover in Calgary. That's a 2.5 hour flight, and then another 1 hour flight to get to Kelowna. And I got on the plane in Toronto, and I have been so nervous about flying for so long that I just thought, okay, I have spent most of my life being very anti pharmaceuticals, but I am so sick of having panic attacks or trying not to have a panic attack, having crazy anxiety coursing through my body. I wasn't yet on the marijuana. I hadn't consumed the Mary Jane regularly, and I wasn't on an SSRI either. And so I had just trauma running through my body on the plane. So many times I went to my doctor and I said, I want you to give me something so I can fly better. I think it's Ativan. And he was like, that sounds like a great idea. I'll give you Ativan. So they prescribed me Ativan. So I get on the plane and it feels like a normal day and I'm feeling fine. I can sort of tell when it's going to happen when I get an anxiety attack on the plane. But weirdly, when I was so calm in the waiting room and I sat in the plane and I was fine. And I always sit by the window so I can look out the window. I feel less crowded. But a whole bunch of very large men, it was like like a football team. They weren't together, but they looked like a football team came in and one sat in front of me and one sat in the aisle and one sat, like they were everywhere. And I just felt like the room was being swallowed up with their shoulders and arms, which would have been delicious, except it made me really anxious. So I thought, I'm going to take an Ativan. So I pop a little Ativan under my tongue and we take off and we're in the air for maybe half an hour. And Ativan doesn't take long to kick in, right? I have a slow body. To be honest, sometimes I only poo every 3 days. I can't believe I'm telling you this, but we are getting to know each other. My husband says he'll have beets and it'll be red the next morning, and I'll have beets and it'll be red 3 days later. So I know it takes 3 days for things to move through me. So it took a little while for the ativan. It took like half an hour. It wasn't instantaneous. But in a half hour, it calms you down, right? Well, it calmed me down, but little did do the pharmaceuticals know that some people like me, when they calm down, discover how fast their bodies actually run. And my body runs like the fucking road runner. Zoom! I was just like buzzing with pent up energy, buzzing. It was like somebody giving me cocaine. It was so intense. And I said to the woman next to me, okay, I think I might be sick, because I felt like I was going to throw up. I have this weird thing where I either I feel like I'm going to throw up or I'm going to pass out. And I don't ever throw up. Since I stopped drinking 22 years ago, I haven't thrown up. I just pass out. So I say, I think I'm going to either throw up or pass out. So then I pass out. And she gets up and gets the guy next to her to get up. The two of them get out. They see that I've passed out. They go and tell the stewardess that I've passed out. The stewardess takes a brief look at me, and then she goes on the intercom and says, somebody's passed out. Is there a medical professional on board? And this paramedic says, I'm a paramedic. And she was like, this guy has fainted right here. And they go and get oxygen for him, for me. He says, get oxygen. So they go and get it, and they bring it back to the seat, and he gets in the seat, and he puts my head in his lap, and he has the oxygen there. And then I woke up. I was out that whole time. That was a long time. And I woke up with this very handsome man hovering above me with a deep voice, asking me if I was okay. Paramedics are very gentle people. He was a sweetheart. He was so nice to me. So I got the whole row to myself. He hung out. He left me in his lap for quite some time, longer than I probably would have left a faggot in my lap if I were him. But he's a good paramedic. And then I got the whole row to myself. He got up, and I got my little oxygen. I got to sniff on the whole way to Calgary for another hour and a half. I started to feel way better. And then when I got off the plane, they had called the paramedics, which was a very responsible thing to do, right? They did the right thing. So the paramedics met me. I got to get off the plane first. And the paramedics met me. Well, I still had a plane to catch in an hour. So I had to do some really sweet talking. I mean, I talked so fast, I really convinced them. And I would like nail my point. I'd like say something and nail my point and then wait and look at them. And then I give them another point. I made sure I was signposting my argument. Anyways, they let me on the next plane. They were like, you need to sign this waiver. We're not going to take you in. We're going to charge you. They're going to mail you a check for us coming here, but it'll be less than if we actually take you to the hospital. We think you're fine too, but you need to sign this waiver. And I was like, don't you worry. I'm going to be fine. It was ativan and an airplane and a plane full of muscle-bound hotties. I passed out. So anyways, it's always helps to gay it up a little, because then people are like, okay, I don't know anything about his life. If he says he's competent, he must be right. So, and now for the most recent one, which is probably the most spectacular. Am I going to tell you all the details? I'm going to tell you all the details. If your kids are watching, you make them go away. So this winter, 2 days before Christmas, I had not a very pleasant cold. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't the best cold. So I thought, okay, it's the holidays, and I had just been grading up a storm in order to get done my term. And it was my first day of my holiday, the 23rd of December. I handed in my grades on the 22nd. So I woke up on the 23rd and I was super happy, and I had a cold. And I'm like, it's my first day of holiday. This is shit. So I decide I'm going to be on top of it, and I'm going to take drugs. So then before I go to bed, I want to get a really good night's sleep, so I sleep really well. So I take like cold medicine, sinus cold medicine. And I took the nighttime one, which helps you fall asleep. And it says you can take 2. So I thought, I'm taking 2. So I took 2 and I went to bed. I woke up the next day and I felt like shit. I felt like somebody had hit me over the head. I was so groggy the next day, but I was like, well, at least I slept a lot, which was great. And I spent the day relaxing. And that night was the 24th of uh, December. Oh no, we're not December. Sorry, it was New Year's. Sorry. Yeah. Anyways, it becomes a little relevant, but not very. It was New Year's. It was like the 30th of December, and then that was or the 29th. Yeah. And then the next night was the 30th. And I took 2 that night. I don't know, whenever. I'm getting so confused about the dates, but it doesn't matter. Uh, I took 2 that second night, and the same thing. The next morning, when I was laying in bed too, I said to my husband, I feel like my heart's racing. I know it's just probably anxiety, but it's kind of weird. My heart's racing, and it felt like my heart was racing yesterday too. But it's so hard to tell, and it's easy to dismiss. So, anyways, I'm just letting you know it was. And he was like, okay, because when you have an active imagination, you can also be a little hypochondriac. I'm a worrier. So he was like, okay, I'm just acknowledging I know you're worrying. And I was like, good. So I go to bed. It was all unspoken, but that's the gist of the temperature in the room. You can sort of sense your husband's body. Anyways, so I go to bed. I wake up the next morning. Same thing. I feel like I've been hit by a truck. And I have a fine day. I still have a cold, whatever. And that night is the night before New Year's. So the third night, I go to bed and I say to Francis when I'm in the bathroom, you know what? I am not going to take 2 pills tonight. I'm just going to take 1 because my heart did a weird thing 2 nights in a row. I need to listen to my body and not doubt myself. If it is just anxiety, fine, but I'm not going to take the risk. I'm only going to take 1 pill. So I take 1 pill and I go to bed. And at 3 a.m., I wake up and I'm super sick. I feel like shit. And I'm going to throw up or I'm going to pass out. So I give Francis a push and I tell him, I'm either going to throw up or I'm going to pass out. And he was like, okay. And he got out of bed and then I passed out. I passed out as he was getting out of bed. And he went to go to the wall and turn the light on and he heard me snoring. So he turned the light on and there I was, no sheets on me. My entire body was curved. I was having a seizure and my body was lifted off the bed in an arc with my neck. I was snoring because I was trying to breathe. It was like because I was trying to suck air in and my passageway was constricted because my whole body was arced with my feet on the bed and it was very intense. And Francis said my eyes were rolled in the back of my head and they were open and I was making this noise and I had a huge erection. That's the adult part of that story. But imagine how, will you ever be able to look at my erection the same again? Jesus. Mary H. Christ. You'd think God did hate gays. Anyways, so it was quite the weird sight. It freaked him the fuck out. He's still freaked out. I asked him some details tonight, and he gave me this look like, oh, you want me to revisit that in my memory? Holy Mary. He told me the next morning, he didn't tell me that night. He told me the next morning he thought I was dying. It was really scary. So then I stopped breathing. I wasn't making the snoring sound. He thought I stopped breathing. And he said that he rubbed my chest right here because that's a good way to stimulate people and just make sure that they're still alive. And I came to from the other side of the world. I came to and I didn't know where I was. I didn't really know who I was. Francis was there talking to me and I was like, okay, I think this is my husband. Yeah, this is Francis. I was in such a deep fog. It was like I had really gone somewhere else, like far away, and I wasn't quite back yet. It makes you wonder if there isn't such a thing as a soul. Like I felt like my spirit had dissipated and it was slowly finding the place where it needed, where to come back. Here's the source. Oh yeah, this body's the source. It was really intense. And for the next 4 hours, I felt super shitty and weird. And Francis would get me a damp cloth, a cool cloth, and I would rub it all over my body, rub it over my face, and just touching myself slowly, continually for 3 hours, 4 hours, kept me awake and feeling like comforted. It was a kind of comfort. And when you're feeling vomity and passy outy, you don't want anyone to talk to you. You don't want any light. You don't want to touch anything. It was so intense. But I realized that it was very similar to the same thing that happened when I was on Ativan. So I talked to my pharmacist friend, Farm Tech, and she looked up the drugs that were in both those things. And she said, oh, yeah, they have really similar side effects. If they're side effects, they're similar, which can make you have seizures and pass out. So I didn't go to the hospital. Francis stayed up with me for the 4 hours, and everything was fine. And I was fine the next day, and I'll never take those drugs again. But Francis told me that when he thought I was dead, he was like, okay, I think I might have to do, pushing on the chest and all of that, do mouth to mouth and everything else. And anyways, it was just this really weird experience where I was passed out. So I didn't know any of this. He didn't tell me anything until the next day because he didn't want to freak me out. He started to tell me a couple of things, and I was like, I don't think I want to know this. So he told me the next day, and he told me the next day, I thought you were going to die. I thought you were in the middle of dying. And so he's had this really traumatic experience, but I was just fainted through the whole thing. So anyways, that's the weird thing about fainting, is that you miss all the fun. Everybody else gets the drama and tells you the story about it, but you're not there for it. So there's my 150 different fainting episodes. I skipped all the boring ones. That was fabulous faints. Okay, so if you missed the very beginning, I said that this weekend, come hell or high water, I'm going to sort out technology some way or another, and I'm going to have 2 guests, Saturday and Sunday night. I'm going to have 1 guest storytellers those nights. I'm going to call up my friends. I'm very excited. I think I know who I'm going to get. I just have to ask them, and they need to say yes. You can send me emails if you have questions or you want to write me something. It's great hearing from people. I do this show not just to be in your living room and make you listen to me, but also so that I hear back from other people. The show brings people to me so I don't feel as cooped up, because I'm an extrovert, if you haven't noticed. You can send me an email at michaelvsmith.com. You can tweet me at michaelvsmith. Tomorrow, I get to do a new story that I'm going to draw from the Sing It With Me Magic Story Bag. I wonder how many people actually sing it with me. Tomorrow's story is, it's kind of a love story with assholes. Fries at my wedding. Not the good kind of assholes, the bad kind of assholes. Fries at my wedding. It's a really good story. So that's tomorrow. You can like this page. It'd be great. There's 5 likes already. I love all of you likers. You licking likers. I like you to lick. You can share any old video you want somewhere to whatever, and you can subscribe. And if you want to have a notification whenever I go live, you can click the notification bell. Here's your selfie time. Every night I do a selfie. Or I give you time to do the selfie. Yeah, I'm not actually doing the selfie because my camera's over there. That's great. Okay, I love you lots. Thanks for coming to listen to me yet again. I'm having fun. I still love you. I'm going to give you a kiss right now. Mwah.